After a service a long time ago, an older gentleman came up to me to thank me for my sermon and to tell me a story, and I have never forgotten it. The story begins where he wakes up and he's on a gurney and he's being rushed down a hospital corridor, and he's got strangers all around him. He was very frightened, he told me, and very confused, and he was trying to find what had happened, but no one was answering him. So at the end of the corridor, they burst through double doors, and they slow down a little bit and turn, and a surgical nurse comes up to him and says, "You had a heart attack, and we're going to take care of you." He remembered that his throat was raw, and he just nodded. And then she said, "I have one thing to ask you. Do you believe that this is your fault?" He waited a bit, and then he croaked out, "No." And she said, "Good. Let's get started." After he was done telling me the story, he pointed to himself and he said he spent the rest of his life making sure that he did right by himself and others, especially if there was anything that needed forgiving. After hearing his story, I started thinking about my family and my dad's heart attack. And I started thinking about how the different sides of my family, the different cultures in my family treated illness and loss. I am descended from Scots-Irish immigrants on one side and Russian-Ukrainian immigrants on the other side. And I found that I realized blame figured largely on both sides of my family. The truth is that my dad hid his chest pains from us and his doctors for 8 years. And he did this because he always thought that it was lung cancer and that he had it because he had smoked. So he didn't want anyone to know because it was his fault. Now, it turned out after 8 years that it was his heart all along. And my mom blamed it on my grandmother's cooking. So after a heart attack, he underwent a 6-way bypass surgery, one of the first actually that the hospital had ever done. But I thought about what my elderly parishioner had told me, and I wondered, was there something to this idea that of blame and shame and guilt and the body? I was very new to the idea of the mind-body connection. The mind-body connection means that the way that we think and feel and what we believe can really have an effect on our biological functions for good or for bad. And by the same token, the way that we are physically could be the way that we're sitting or stooping, or what we eat, or how much sleep we get, or how much exercise we get. All of that affects our thoughts and our feelings, again, for good or for bad. This interaction is what we call the mind-body connection, and it brings a whole level of complexity to understanding health and healing. Because of my family history, I was curious about other religions and how they regarded illness and loss. After all, I'm in an interfaith family, and there were very different traditions and understandings passed down on both sides of the family. And years ago, when I joined a coalition of faith communities in the Hartford area, I was able to get some of those questions answered. I joined the leadership of this group, and our leaders were Baha'i, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, Jain, and Sikh, and also Unitarian Universalists, me. And together, we would explore how each of our faiths made meaning of our daily lives, including how we regarded health and healing. And I found that there were very striking differences in the way that each of us understood and interpreted what was going on in our bodies, and how our grasp of faith and science shaped our understanding of what it meant to heal. Now, some of us did refer to the bad things that happened. Some believed that folks deserved what happened to them. Some believed that folks did not deserve what happened to them, that it was a mystery that was shared by all living things. But there were three ideas, three notions that most of us had in common. And they were the connection between the mind and the spirit and the body, and the necessity and importance of maintaining a balance in our lives between our bodies and our spirits, and the importance of offering a communal response, the response of the family and the community to illness and loss. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit right now, and I encourage you to look up things on your own. So, what was the nature of healing and sickness? And I'll start with some text from the Baha'i faith. And the Baha'is believe that healing requires both medicine for the body and prayers for the spirit. The prayers, say the Baha'u'llah, the prayers which were revealed to ask for healing apply both to physical and spiritual healing. And Abdul Baha shared this in Europe quite a few years ago. He said, "A man living with his thoughts in this kingdom knows perpetual joy. But the ills all flesh is heir to do not pass him by, but they only touch the surface of his life. The depths are calm and serene." This idea that there is something eternal going on in the soul and the spirit, and what's happening with the body is only temporary, pervades a lot of our oldest traditional faiths. Jainism, Jain, is the second oldest faith in the world that we have recorded history of. And they believe the same thing, this almost duality of the mind, the spirit, and the body. So my Muslim friends in this group explained to me that their understanding is the mind and the body and the soul belong to God and will return to Him at the end of life. But what Islam took away from this was the sanctity of human life and the need to ensure both physical and spiritual well-being. So they studied medicine and treatment centuries before other civilizations did. And there are, of course, some, as there are in every faith, that believe that they have to trust in God for everything. But during the Middle Ages, even as early as the Middle Ages, Islamic medicine was more advanced in the West. And for all these centuries, they have sought to harmonize advances in medical science and in technology. And they do this reflecting their values that their health and their bodies are good because they belong to God, and they want to preserve this goodness as much as possible. My Christian friends, there was a United Church of Christ minister and a Catholic priest, and their interpretation of illness and suffering was more that God was using this to produce something good in us, to remind us or convince us of our need for grace, our need for the saving work of Jesus on the cross, and the frailty of any other thing in the world that we might trust in. They also shared that conviction that God was always holding us in grace, and that God companioned us through whatever we were going through. The United Church of Christ minister related this story to me, and it's one that you may be familiar with, because it holds not only that idea of holding all of us together in grace, but it holds the idea of all of us being connected in this. And by all of us, I mean all beings. So there's a story by Sue Monk Kidd called On Being Still. It starts with the family hearing this thud, and they realize that a bird has flown into the plate glass window on the patio. And Kidd says she was stunned and her right wing was a little lopsided. She looked so fragile and alone that I sat down beside her. I sat beside her, unable to resist the feeling that we shared something, the two of us, the wounds and the brokenness of life, crumpled wings, a collision with something harsh and real. And I felt like crying for her, for myself, for every broken thing in the world. And that moment taught me that while the postures of stillness within the cocoon are frequently an individual experience, we also need to share our stillness. The bird taught me anew that we're all in this together, that we need to sit in one another's stillness and take up postures of prayer. I learned, she wrote, that stillness can be the prayer that transforms us, and how much more concentrated the stillness becomes when it's shared is also that moment of prayer. Finally, she said, the bird was finished being still, and she cocked her head to one side and lifted her wings and flew. And grace is everywhere, I thought. This is the story that my friend related to us to explain what her thoughts were about being ill and injured and by the community that surrounded her. The Jewish views of sickness are different. And I don't have any quotes of my friend, the rabbi from this group, but I did find something that related to what he was telling us. So the Jewish views of illness and suffering are just part of a natural order of things. that God sets in motion but doesn't control. Illness is really a mystery. It's understood as a part of life. Illness is not something that we can always explain. Illness and suffering can strike anyone. There is a prayer of healing called the Middleborough, and there's a phrase in there called Refuah Shlema, and that means restoring some people to wholeness, restoring the patient or the person that you care about to wholeness. It speaks to a distinction that Judaism makes between cure and healing. And this is important. They refer back to the story of when Jacob wrestled with the angel. He was left with a limp. But it says in the Torah that he was still shlem, whole. The focus of Jewish healing is that we can't always expect a cure, but we can hope to be made whole. This idea that we are connected also permeates many of our religions, but particularly the older ones. In the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, this is Buddhist understanding. We are all connected. When you touch one thing, you are touching everything. Whatever we do has an effect on others. Therefore, we must learn to live mindfully, to touch the peace inside all of us. If everyone lives mindfully, everyone will be more healthy, feel more fulfilled in their daily lives, and there will be more peace. I like that thought. There are some words in Hinduism from the Upanishad, the Chandogya Upanishad. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the atom, so is the universe. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. Imagine we are connected to the entire universe. There's also an old thought that permeates many religions, and that is the idea of balance. The Ayurveda is over 4,000 years old. And the Ayurveda deals with life and living on this planet. And it spells out the diagnosis and cure for many illnesses. It's based on the implicit idea that there's a connection between our body and our mind. And the central theme of that idea in the Ayurveda is that the physical body is a manifestation of three energy fields: life energy, mind, and soul. And they are interlaced and function as one complete system. Keeping a balance of these energies guarantees good health. In our faith, Unitarian Universalism, we have traditions, even though we arrive at them from many different points of view. In our faith, we see illness and misfortune not as some kind of divine retribution, but as a part of life. Part of being human is to experience times of being broken and brokenhearted. What matters is how we endure how we learn, and how we treat ourselves and each other afterward. That is why we have principles of how to be together in the world, rather than creeds of belief. Because we are of worth, we say. Because we are all of worth. We are unique, and at the same time, we are a part of something greater that values us. We are part of something greater that values us. Some of us, myself included, prefer solitude when we're feeling lousy. But some of us want community. Some of us want a circle of prayers, a circle of songs, a prayer shawl, something that connects and links us to the community that we belong, where we can place our comfort. We have no ceremonies for inviting health, no affirmations and understandings of the mind and body connection like some of our other faiths. We don't have rituals and prescriptions for coping with adversity. No mutually affirmed understandings of an afterlife. When we say our final goodbyes, we mourn our loss and we celebrate the life that we shared together. It's tears and laughter, tears and laughter. The good does not last forever, and the bad does not either. We have to be in balance between the two to have our strength. My dad died in the early hours of a January morning. And at 6:30, after we got the call from the hospital, my sisters and my mother and I all gathered in the upstairs hall, and we were just staring out at the water, and we were just stunned. We were numb. We couldn't speak. We couldn't hold each other even, hold each other tightly. We were completely lost. And then my youngest sister said, "Dad once told me that he wanted to be cremated and his ashes spread all over that blankety-blank neighbor's front lawn." And after we finished laughing, we started crying, and we were laughing and crying and holding each other tightly. And the world was right side up again, and we could move on. We gave my Jewish Unitarian father a mini Irish wake, and it brought us back to ourselves. Tears and laughter, laughter and tears. And when we did, we could finally remember him, not after all the months of illness, but remember him the way that he was, big and funny and musical and opinionated and there. So we know it is true. There is no cure for loss, but there can be healing. And that is what all faiths tell us. So Shanti, Shalom, Hasiti, Salam, Hewa, Dohiye, Pax, Paco, Mir. And may it be so. Thank you for listening.